I woke up after 24 hours in a coma. Before I could speak, the nurse said the surgery was done, consent signed. But I had never signed anything. I looked down. My hips were restrained. And there he was, my brother, smiling, saying he had made the decision for me because I was no longer mentally sound. 3 days later, I got a notice from the bank. The two-story house I'd lived in for 41 years had been used as collateral for a loan under his name. I spent my whole life protecting him, and now he wanted to steal even the roof over my head, all in the name of family. But what he didn't know was that he had operated on the wrong woman, the one he thought would stay silent forever. I woke up to fluorescent lights and a bitter taste in my mouth. My throat was dry, my limbs heavy. I tried to move, but something felt wrong, deeply wrong. I looked down. My hips were strapped, bound in place with thick white padding and metal rails. Pain pulsed low and sharp, like something had been cut open and rearranged without my permission. And maybe that's exactly what happened. The nurse came in, mid-30s, blonde ponytail. Her face flickered between professional calm and uncomfortable pity. She checked a monitor and said, without looking at me, "You made it through the surgery. Everything went fine." I blinked. "What surgery?" She hesitated, then flipped through a clipboard. "Total hip replacement, signed off by next of kin." Next of kin. I stared at her. No words came out. The door opened again. My brother Victor strolled in like he owned the place. Expensive slacks, that stupid gold watch, the same smug face he always wore when he thought he was in control. He walked straight to the end of the bed and grinned. "Well, you're awake, thank God." He looked at the nurse. "Told you she was tough." She nodded quickly and stepped out. Coward. Victor turned back to me and pulled up a chair like this was some cozy family moment. "I had to make the call, Marion," he said, all sweet and condescending. "The doctors needed consent. You were out. I stepped in. Someone had to. You weren't in any condition to decide." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was racing too fast to form sentences. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know how it is. You're not exactly young, and with your memory the way it's been lately, well, I did what was best." My memory? What the hell was he talking about? I forced myself to breathe slowly, to not react. Not yet. Victor had always been slippery, ever since we were kids. He was the type who smiled at you while taking things off your plate. But I never thought he'd go this far. A hip surgery. Unauthorized. Then it clicked. My house. I remembered the last letter from the county. Property value had gone up. Way up. And just last week, Victor was asking casual questions about refinancing, reverse mortgages, just in case something ever happened to me. And now something had happened to me. Only I hadn't been the one who started it. 3 days later, still recovering, I got a letter slipped under my hospital room door. No envelope, just a printed notice, a notice of lien. The house I had lived in for 41 years, paid off in full. My home, my anchor, used as collateral. The signature on the lien authorization form was mine, except it wasn't. My signature has a sharp loop at the M. The one on the document had a shaky curve, like someone trying to copy it from memory. Victor had forged my name. I closed my eyes and felt the pressure build behind them. Not from pain, from fury. I had spent my entire life cleaning up after people, raising his kids when he ran off, co-signing his business loan when no bank would touch him. He always came to me when he needed saving, and now he thought I was too weak to stop him from taking the only thing I had left. He thought wrong. You see, I may be old, I may be tired, but I didn't survive decades of heartbreak and disappointment just to be taken out by my own blood. That day, I stopped being a patient. I stopped being his sister. I became something else. If you've ever had someone smile in your face while stabbing you quietly behind your back, keep listening. Because what comes next is not a sob story. It's not forgiveness. It's something better. It's a reckoning. I waited until Victor left the room before I tried to sit up. The dull, throbbing pain in my side was a reminder that whatever he signed off on had been real. I gritted my teeth, reached for the bed remote, and raised the head just enough so I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in silence. The clipboard was hanging at the end of the bed. Basic stuff. My name, patient ID, date of procedure. But when I flipped to the second page, I saw it. Consent for surgery. Signature, Marion E. Cole. Except it wasn't mine. Whoever wrote that thing tried hard. Same slant, same loop on the E. But they made the C too wide, the tail on the R was missing. And most of all, I never used my middle initial on legal documents. Ever. I had told Victor that a dozen times when I was helping him dispute a tax issue 10 years ago. He forgot. Or maybe he never paid attention in the first place. My jaw clenched. There was a knock on the door. A younger nurse came in. She had a badge that read Ria, and she looked like she was still fresh from school. She smiled politely and said she needed to check my vitals. I stayed quiet, watching her as she wrapped the cuff around my arm and tapped at the monitor. Then she glanced down at the chart, frowned slightly, and muttered, "They rushed this one through, didn't they?" I turned my head toward her, slow and deliberate. "Excuse me." She froze, then tried to recover. "Oh, I just meant the consent came in really late. Like, just minutes before the OR was booked. But it's not my place. Sorry." She looked away and pretended to fix something on the machine. Too late. I had heard enough. Victor hadn't just forged my name. He'd waited until the last second, slipped the fake paperwork through while no one was paying attention, probably betting on shift changes and administrative chaos. He knew how hospitals worked. His ex-wife was an insurance adjuster. He had picked up a few tricks during their divorce. And now he had used them on me. I needed to know what else he'd signed. I asked to see the patient advocate. Ria hesitated, then nodded and said she would request someone. But 2 hours passed and no one came. So I took it into my own hands. I asked Ria if she could bring me a copy of my own chart. I told her I needed it for personal records. She blinked like no one had ever asked for that before. But eventually she printed it out and left it on my tray table. It was thicker than I expected. Pages of notes, check-ins, post-op instructions. And then near the end, I saw it again. A page labeled Financial Responsibility Acknowledgement. Signature, Marion E. Cole. That damn fake signature again. And just beneath it, another line. Authorized guarantor, Victor T. Cole. My stomach turned. I flipped the page and saw something even worse. A lien was already in progress, set to be applied to my home address in the event of delayed payment or dispute. It was a standard clause, but in this case, the address was correct. My home, not Victor's, mine. And it had a timestamp. Time of authorization, 2:11 a.m. That was the exact window I had been in and out of sedation. Victor had submitted a forged signature and financial guarantee while I was unconscious, in the dead of night, likely through the administrative wing, using someone on the inside. I didn't feel pain in my hip anymore. I felt rage. I needed more. I buzzed the nurse and asked to speak to the hospital's compliance officer. She gave me the usual delay script, but I didn't budge. I said I wouldn't take another pill or IV drip until I got access to the audit log showing who entered my electronic record and when. She said she would escalate it. I made sure she saw me write it down. After she left, I pulled out my phone. The charger was still plugged into the wall. I turned it on, ignoring the flood of missed calls and texts from Victor. I searched for a name I hadn't used in years. Janice L. Boudreau, retired attorney, old friend. The kind of woman who used to scare insurance reps with her tone alone. We hadn't talked since her second husband passed, but I knew she'd answer. She did. Her voice cracked when she realized it was me. I kept it short. Told her I needed help. Told her I'd send everything I had. She didn't ask questions, just told me to send it now. I scanned the forged signature, the consent form, the financial page, took pictures and emailed them to her with one line. He forged everything. I need this stopped. Then I sat back and stared at the ceiling. Victor thought I wouldn't catch it. He thought the drugs would keep me foggy, that I'd be too weak, too slow, too grateful to be alive to notice. He thought wrong, and he had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I didn't wait for anyone to knock. I buzzed the nurse and requested a wheelchair. My voice was calm but direct. No tremble, no hesitation. If they thought I'd stay bedridden while my life was being signed away, they were dead wrong. Ria showed up again, a little surprised, holding the wheelchair with both hands. "I can't discharge you, but I can take you downstairs if it's within hospital grounds," she said. "That's all I need," I replied. I didn't bother explaining myself. She wheeled me down to the administrative wing. The carpet changed, the smell too. Less like antiseptic, more like coffee and paperwork. Nurses disappeared, replaced by staff in business casual. The faces here weren't tired, just bored. I asked to speak to Bennett. "Who?" the receptionist asked. "Howard Bennett," I said. "Director of Patient Financial Services." She blinked and typed something, then gave me a smile that was half polite, half suspicious. "I'm not sure he's available without an appointment." I didn't respond, just stared. She picked up the phone. A minute later, a man in his early 50s came out. Grey buzz cut, cheap cologne, confidence that came from being behind the curtain too long. "Mrs. Cole," he said, already faking a warm tone. "Let's find a room." He led me to a small consultation office with frosted glass and a round table. He sat like he was about to give me bad news, wrapped in good intentions. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding your billing and consent records," he started. "There's no confusion," I said. "There's fraud." He opened his folder slowly. "Mrs. Cole, your brother signed under emergency conditions. You were incapacitated. As next of kin, he's authorized—" "He forged my signature, twice," I interrupted. He paused. "Even if that were true, the documents were processed through standard protocol. I've already sent them to a lawyer, a real one, not someone whose job is to hide bad decisions behind paperwork." His eyes sharpened, just for a second. I placed the printed copies of the consent and financial pages on the table. I pointed at the timestamps. "Who entered these forms into the system at 2:11 a.m. on the 14th? He didn't answer. "I've requested the audit log, and if you delay or alter it, that's obstruction, not hospital policy. That's criminal." Bennett leaned back, folding his arms. "You have every right to request a full review, but I suggest we proceed through proper internal channels." I smiled, the first time that day. "I don't do internal anymore." There was a knock. Ria stepped in. "Sorry to interrupt. She's needed for post-op imaging." Bennett looked almost relieved. I left the papers on his desk. Back in my room, a hospital staffer was waiting. Not Ria, a man I didn't recognize. He handed me an envelope. A notice of pending guardianship application, filed by Victor Cole. Effective immediately, he was petitioning for temporary legal control of my medical decisions, citing cognitive decline, confusion, and lack of awareness post-surgery. Attached were two statements, one from Bennett, one from a doctor I had never spoken to, both confirming concerning signs of disorientation. My hands went cold. This wasn't just about the house anymore. Victor was building a case. He wanted it all. And he wanted me out of the way first. I called Janice again. "They're accelerating," I said. "Guardianship filings. Doctors backing him." "I'll handle the legal end," she replied. "You focus on pressure, public pressure. Find a trigger, something visible." I knew exactly what that would be. That evening, I asked Ria a question. "When is the next donor gala?" She raised an eyebrow. "The annual one. It's in 2 days, right here, auditorium lobby." Perfect. I opened my old cloud drive and downloaded a folder from my retirement. It had my templates, my reports, my formatting skills. I used to oversee budget audits. I knew how to present sensitive numbers clearly and fast. I created 3 large boards. First, forensic signature analysis. I pulled 2 past bank forms I'd signed years ago. I overlaid them with the fake surgical consent using tracing lines, highlighted inconsistencies. I didn't need expert certification. I just needed it to look like what it was, a lie. Second, chain of access. I reconstructed the system flow from login to signature upload using the timestamps in my chart. Color-coded. Clear. Bennett's name glowed like a neon sign. Third, lean trail. I traced the mortgage transfer attempt Victor initiated through the hospital system to the loan inquiry flagged by my bank. By morning, I had all 3 printed. Ria helped me laminate them. She didn't ask questions anymore. That afternoon, I requested one more thing: an open microphone slot. The hospital was advertising patient recovery stories during the donor gala. I told them I had one, and I promised I'd keep it under 5 minutes. They agreed. Victor was about to find out what happens when you try to bury a woman alive and leave her conscious. The morning before the gala, I received a visitor I didn't expect. Not Victor, not hospital staff. A woman. Well-dressed, but not flashy. Her heels clicked against the linoleum like she wanted people to hear her coming. She entered my room without knocking and introduced herself as Deborah Lake, court-appointed social worker. I knew what that meant before she even opened her mouth. She was here about the guardianship filing. I kept my face still. Deborah took the chair across from me, flipping open a leather folio. Her tone was polished, professional. Not warm, not cruel, just detached. She began her assessment, asked me to state the date, my name, my age, the president, my address. I answered each one clearly. Then came the personal questions. Had I ever forgotten to pay a bill? Had I missed meals recently? Had I wandered? Had I experienced sadness, paranoia, disorientation, trouble with sleep? She kept her eyes on the form, barely looking at me, as if the answers didn't matter. Only the checkboxes did. I cut her off midway through the 3rd page. "Is Victor paying for this evaluation?" She hesitated, then smiled like a teacher trying to redirect a student. "I'm here on behalf of the court." I nodded. Noted. The interview lasted 17 minutes. I watched the clock. After she left, I called Janice. "Move faster," I said. "I already filed a motion to block the guardianship," she replied. "But we need weight, something undeniable." I had it already. It was sitting in 3 laminated panels next to my wheelchair, but I needed more. Something current, something live. That afternoon, I asked Ria to bring me a phone charger and the login code for the patient education portal. I had no intention of watching recovery videos. I wanted footage. Each hallway in that hospital had cameras, every entry and exit point in admin. Victor wasn't smart enough to avoid them all. Ria couldn't give me direct access. But she could give me a name: Harold Kirkland, head of facilities, retired sheriff deputy. She whispered that he didn't like Bennett, said he always acted like he had something to hide. Perfect. I called him, told him who I was, told him I didn't need favors, just facts. He agreed to meet me the next morning before the gala. That night, Victor showed up unannounced. He brought flowers, tulips. I hate tulips. He placed them on the windowsill and sat down like we were about to reminisce. I didn't speak. I just stared at him until he squirmed. He started with his usual tone, soft, brotherly, told me how stressed he'd been, said the whole guardianship thing was misunderstood, that the house was a temporary solution while I recovered, that he only wanted to protect me. Then he tried to pivot. The gala's tomorrow. I thought maybe you shouldn't speak at it. Just rest. Let it pass. There it was. I let the silence hang for 5 full seconds. Then I said one sentence. You should wear black. His mouth tightened. I looked at him again, really looked. His hair was thinner, his shirt too tight. There was a shine of sweat on his temple despite the AC. He was unraveling already, and I hadn't even touched a microphone yet. He stood up quickly, muttered something about checking in later, and left without taking the flowers. I slept well that night. The next morning, Ria wheeled me into the maintenance hallway where Harold was waiting. He handed me a flash drive and a manila envelope. No cameras in that little back office Bennett likes to use, he said. But you'll like what's here. I nodded. Inside the envelope were printed stills from security footage. Victor entering the admin wing at 1:57 a.m., Bennett following 6 minutes later, both leaving 15 minutes after that, walking out separate exits. No doctor, no emergency team, just 2 men with too much to hide. I returned to my room and printed one final board. Unauthorized access timeline. It was clean, simple. Timestamp, location, photo, labeled clearly. I added it to the lineup. By midday, the auditorium lobby was being transformed. White tablecloths, buffet trays, a banner that read, "Celebrating Healing Through Community." Fitting. The event started at 6. By 5:30, I was dressed, hair-brushed, sitting upright in the wheelchair with my 3 boards standing like soldiers behind me. At 5:45, I saw Victor enter through the side door. He was in a navy suit and new shoes. He scanned the room like a man checking for exits, not friends. He didn't see me. Not yet. The microphone was on a low podium near the stage. I had 5 minutes. I planned to use 4. At 6:12, they called my name. I took a breath. Then I rolled forward. I rolled up to the microphone like I was rolling into court. The room wasn't quiet. Not yet. There were murmurs, light laughter, the clinking of glasses, donors chatting, staff half listening. No one expected anything. Just another patient ready to talk about healing, hope, or some story meant to tug at the heart before dessert. I didn't give them that. I adjusted the microphone slightly, cleared my throat, and began. My name is Marion Cole. I've been a patient at this hospital for 12 days. I came in conscious. I woke up operated on, with no memory of signing anything, because I didn't. A few people stopped talking. Not many. I kept going. Someone else signed for me. And then, after that, someone placed a lien against my home. The same home I've lived in for 41 years, without my knowledge, without my consent. Now the room started shifting. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. People leaned in. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to expose you. And by you, I mean a very specific group of people. I brought receipts. I turned slightly and nodded toward the laminated boards. Ria stepped forward and flipped the first one. A clear overlay showing 3 signatures. 2 from past verified legal documents, 1 from the surgical consent form. The fake stood out like a child's forgery next to the real thing. This, I said, pointing, was entered into hospital records at 2:11 in the morning, uploaded by Bennett, under the name of a patient who was sedated and incapable of speech. A visible ripple moved through the audience. A couple of people in suits sat up straighter. The second board went up. A timeline of logins and access points, color-coded, names attached. You see here, I said, Bennett accessed my chart 3 separate times between 1:30 and 2:15. None of those accesses were authorized. None were documented in the clinical record. And during that window, my brother Victor Cole walked into the admin wing, stayed for 15 minutes, then exited through the south corridor. People were fully locked in now. Even those who had been busy filling their plates had stopped. One man in a red tie looked over at Victor, who sat frozen, jaw tight. The final board came up, a line chart showing the progression from forged consent to lien documentation to attempted guardianship. 3 steps, I said. Take control of the body, secure the property, remove the voice. Silence. I looked straight ahead. But I'm still here, still speaking. And I've filed a formal complaint to the State Medical Board, the Hospital Compliance Office, and the District Attorney. The legal wheels are in motion. Tonight, I wanted you all to see the face of what you funded. The face of someone who got cut open without consent, so your surgical quotas could look good on paper. I paused. Let that sentence land. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Then I turned and rolled off stage. The silence held for a beat too long. Then people started whispering. Not quietly, loud, panicked whispering. Some donors walked straight out. Others turned toward the hospital executives, demanding answers. The microphone was cut. A coordinator tried to redirect with music. It didn't work. Victor was gone by the time I reached the back hallway. But Bennett wasn't. He stood near the emergency exit, face pale, phone in hand. He looked like he had swallowed glass. 2 security officers approached him and asked him to come with them. Ria met me near the elevators. She didn't say anything, just gave me a small nod. Her hands were shaking. Back in my room, I sat still for a while. My body ached, but it wasn't the surgical pain. It was the tension of months, maybe years, of being underestimated, of being treated like a fading voice in the background of other people's agendas. Janice called. That was surgical, she said. In every sense. The footage hit the local press 10 minutes ago. The audit logs and documents are with the DA. We'll file the emergency injunction first thing in the morning. Guardianship petition is dead. I didn't answer right away. I was watching the hallway through the small window in the door. Staff moved quickly. Administrators with clipboards whispered in corners. Something had shifted in the air. It wasn't over yet. But the tone had changed. Later that night, I received a formal letter slid under my door. On hospital letterhead, signed by the Chief Medical Officer, full cancellation of any outstanding financial obligation. Official apology for procedural breach. Bennett placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. It wasn't justice. But it was the beginning. And Victor had yet to face me directly. I knew he would try. He always did. Cowards never leave without begging first. But he wouldn't find the same sister he thought he could manipulate in a hospital bed. He'd find something much colder, much sharper. And he'd learn, once and for all, that he hadn't stolen my silence. He'd only sharpened my voice. The morning after the gala, I expected quiet. I expected things to slow down for a moment. They didn't. At 8:03 a.m., my room phone rang. It wasn't Ria. It wasn't Janice. It was someone from the bank. They were calling to verify the cancellation of a second lien application submitted less than 24 hours ago. Under my name. Requested by Victor. Backdated to the day after my surgery. I gripped the edge of the bed so hard I felt my pulse in my palm. He wasn't running. He was doubling down. The house wasn't enough. He had tried once. I blocked it. So he tried again. New route, new angle, new document trail. I asked the woman on the phone to freeze all activity under my account. Then I called Janice. She answered on the second ring. He tried again, I said. He just filed another lien. I'll contact the bank's fraud unit directly, she replied. You stay focused. This means one thing, he's desperate, and desperate people get sloppy. I hung up and buzzed for a nurse. I needed help getting dressed. Fully dressed. No more gowns, no more weakness, slacks, jacket, shoes. My hands shook while buttoning, but I got through it. Ria entered, just as I was adjusting my collar. You're not supposed to. I need access to hospital procurement records, I said. She blinked, stunned, but she didn't argue. 20 minutes later, she came back with a file. Not the full archive, but enough. Billing records, surgical quotas, staff incentive programs. It all clicked faster than I expected. Bennett and Victor weren't working alone out of coincidence. The hospital had a pilot initiative running quietly over the past 2 quarters. A surgical efficiency bonus offered to key administrators for maximizing OR throughput during off hours. Between midnight and 6 a.m., every successful billable procedure processed during that window triggered a $2,000 operations bonus. Not for the surgeon, for admin. And Bennett's name showed up 12 times in the past 6 months. All between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. All fast-tracked consents. All patients over 65. I grabbed a pen and started circling names, cross-checking. 4 of them were listed as deceased. 2 had been transferred to assisted care within 2 weeks of their surgeries. This wasn't efficiency. This was exploitation. They were targeting the weak, the confused, the silent. And I had just been the next one on the conveyor belt. I took a photo of every page and sent them to Janice. She called back immediately. This is bigger than Victor, she said. This is systemic. This is lawsuit territory. Can you connect it? I asked. Give me 48 hours. We didn't have 48. Because at 2:14 that afternoon, a courier arrived at my hospital room with another envelope. This time, it wasn't from Victor. It was from a private lender, not the bank. A company I didn't recognize. Inside was a notice of intent to foreclose. Foreclose. They claimed I had entered into a home equity contract through an online notary system using a remote signature platform. All documents enclosed, digital initials, verification stamps, a timestamp that placed the signing at 3:11 a.m. 3 nights ago, the night of the gala, while I was asleep. Victor had moved to online forgery, and whoever this lender was, they had processed it like it was nothing more than a click on a screen. I called Janice again. They just tried to steal my house while I was speaking on stage. I'm putting this in front of the DA today, she said, but you need to prepare for something. What? They're going to try to flip it. Victor is going to say you're unstable, that you're paranoid, that the gala was staged, and if they get one doctor, one staffer to support it, it muddies everything. I sat there, looking out the window. Then I stood up. I'm getting out of here. Ria helped me discharge. I signed the papers, packed the documents, took the flash drives, the boards, every folder. I didn't say goodbye. I left the hospital in a rideshare sedan, told the driver to take me straight to the local press office. There was a journalist there, a woman named Elise Bannon. She had covered nursing home fraud 3 years ago and broken the biggest Medicare abuse case in the state. I told her everything. I showed her everything. By nightfall, the story was drafted. Headline: Hospital exec and family member accused of forging elderly patient's consent for profit. It ran at 6 a.m. the next morning. Along with it, a clip from the gala, my voice steady over the microphone, describing every move they made. Victor called that night. I didn't answer. Let him sit in the dark, waiting. His game was still going, but mine had just changed the board. The story hit the local news like gasoline on dry leaves. By noon, Elise's article had been picked up by 2 regional affiliates. By 3 p.m., the headline was rotating on hospital waiting room TVs. Staff stopped pretending nothing was happening. Conversations slowed when I walked past. Some avoided eye contact. A few nodded silently as if to say, I saw it. By 5 o'clock, I was no longer just a patient. I was a problem. Victor had yet to appear. That didn't surprise me. Men like him don't come when the fire's hot. They send someone else to assess the damage first. And I didn't have to wait long. At 5:46, a dark blue SUV pulled up outside my temporary recovery unit, where I had relocated after discharging myself from the main hospital. A man in a tan blazer stepped out, tall, clean-cut, smile that didn't touch his eyes. He carried a briefcase and a subtle arrogance. His name was David Renner, and he introduced himself as legal counsel for Victor Cole. He didn't ask to sit. He just walked in, opened his file, and began to talk like this was a real estate deal, not attempted financial murder. I'm here to offer a resolution, he said. An opportunity to correct the miscommunication between your brother and the institutions involved. I didn't move. I didn't blink. He continued. Mr. Cole is prepared to reverse all financial documents currently in dispute. Any liens, loans, or filings. In exchange, he asks for a signed withdrawal of your complaint to the DA, a public clarification regarding the gala, and a cease and desist on all further media statements. I let him finish. Then I stood up. The chair creaked. My leg still throbbed slightly from the surgery, but I stayed steady. I walked to the side table, picked up a manila folder, and opened it. Inside was the newest copy of the internal compliance audit, the one I had received that morning from a sympathetic nurse, still on the inside. I placed it on the table between us. Page 7, I said. He opened it, looked down, jaw stiffened. That page contained an internal memo from Bennett to his staff, sent 2 weeks prior to my operation. In it, he outlined the financial benefit structure tied to overnight surgeries. It even included examples, my case among them, marked as high potential. Renner said nothing. I placed a second document on top. A notarized statement from a former billing clerk, whistleblower status pending, confirming that Victor had requested access to hospital financial policy files the week before I was admitted. The paper trail was complete. Renner looked up. His mouth opened slightly, as if trying to find a softer version of the truth to offer. I didn't let him speak. You came here to negotiate like this is a business error, I said. It's not. It's a pattern. It's exploitation dressed as efficiency, and I'm not here for compensation. I'm here for exposure. He stood up, closed his folder, and left without shaking my hand. Good. At 7:20 that evening, the next fire lit. A second article dropped. Not from Elise this time, but from a healthcare watchdog group. It linked 4 deaths and 2 forced guardianship cases to the same overnight policy Bennett created. Same department, same bonus structure, all tied to patients with little or no family representation. Except one. Me. I was the one who pushed back. And I was still pushing. That night, the hospital issued a public statement calling the program a failed internal initiative and announcing that Bennett had been terminated effective immediately. By 10 o'clock p.m., Victor finally broke silence. He left me a voicemail. He didn't apologize. He didn't take blame. He just pleaded. He said the money was gone, that he owed people, that the hospital had promised him it would be simple, safe, quick, that he didn't know it would go this far, that he just wanted to protect the family name. I deleted the message. Family isn't something you protect after betrayal. It's something you defend before it. Victor made his choice the moment he held a pen over my name and signed like I didn't exist. Now I was making mine. And I hadn't even reached the final move. 2 days after the second article dropped, the heat moved from media coverage to legal fire. Janice called at 7:32 a.m. sharp. She had filed a motion for an emergency injunction with the court, not only to freeze any current or pending financial activity under my name, but also to suspend Victor's legal authority across all related matters. It included a request to unseal previous property and health power of attorney documents he had filed in my name, ones I never knew existed. He had forged more than signatures. He had faked an entire paper trail of control. I didn't even flinch. By now, I expected it. While Janice worked on the legal front, I went for the throat on the public side. I contacted Elise again and gave her a new name. A nurse who had contacted me anonymously through a secure email after the story went live. Her name was Katrina Valdez. She had worked night shifts in the surgical ward for 4 years. She had stories, charts, records. She was ready to talk. Elise ran with it. By noon, a third article went live, quoting Katrina directly. She confirmed that Bennett's overnight quotas weren't just encouraged, they were monitored and rewarded. She described meetings where patients were referred to as low-resistance candidates and described how some family members were steered towards signing off with minimal explanation. She had email receipts, she had audio, and she had named names. Victor's was at the top of the internal referral list, marked as willing family liaison for 3 separate patients. 2 of them were now deceased. One was still in a long-term care home, unaware that she no longer held the deed to her house. The fallout was instant. The hospital board released a formal statement within 6 hours. They announced a third-party investigation, paused all elective overnight procedures, and severed all ties with Victor Cole as a community liaison. He was erased in a single sentence. But that wasn't enough. Janice called again that evening. Her voice was sharp, focused. "The court approved the injunction," she said. "Victor is frozen out. Temporarily." "Temporarily doesn't mean permanently," I replied. "It will," she said, "if you push one more domino." That domino came from a source neither of us expected. It was a voicemail from an internal investigator at the Office of Inspector General. They had been following the public coverage and decided to reopen an old Medicare fraud case tied to surgical billing spikes. One of the flagged cases had a familiar name attached: Bennett. And in the newly re-examined files, another name appeared: Victor Cole. as a family assistant on 2 claim documents, paid as a contractor. Now we weren't just talking about forged signatures and stolen property. Now we were talking about federal charges. I stayed quiet as Janice processed the report. Her breathing on the other end slowed, then steadied. "We'll turn this into a grand jury review," she said. "They don't know it yet, but they're finished." I hung up and stared at the night outside my window. The sky was darker than usual. Or maybe it just felt that way, because the war was no longer in the hospital or in the news. It was behind doors, in conference rooms, in federal agencies, and it was all closing in on him, on them. But Victor didn't lie down. Not yet. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, taken 2 nights ago, at the front steps of the recovery facility. I was in my wheelchair, holding a folder, talking to a nurse. The caption read, "We know where you are. Enough now." I showed it to Janice. She didn't panic. She didn't even sound surprised. "That means it's working," she said. "Now we bury them properly." She filed an official harassment complaint with the court. Had the message traced. It pinged from a burner phone, registered under an LLC tied to a shell company. The address on record was an office in the same building where Victor used to operate his side businesses, the ones he'd dissolved last year, or claimed to. Now it was obstruction. Now it was retaliation. Now it wasn't just drama. It was criminal. The same afternoon, a federal subpoena landed on the hospital's legal team desk. Elise confirmed it within minutes. And later that night, I received a final email from the nurse, Katrina. Attached was a PDF. A chart. Names, surgeries, bonuses, all color-coded. At the very bottom was a highlighted entry. Marion Cole. Procedure, hip replacement. Time, 2:11 a.m. Bonus, $2,000. Entered by Bennett. Referred by Victor Cole. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just printed it out and stapled it to the front of the final presentation I was preparing. Because when the court opened next, it wouldn't just be Victor facing exposure. It would be the entire system that tried to turn my body into a paycheck. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. The walls were grey, the lights too bright. Everything sterile, like the inside of a surgical ward. Fitting. The judge entered at 9:02 sharp. Janice sat beside me, calm, controlled. Her folder was thicker than Victor's entire defense file. Victor sat across the aisle. Not smug, not confident, just smaller. He avoided my gaze, fingers twitching near his lap. His lawyer, the same David Renner who came to my recovery unit, leaned over and whispered something. Victor didn't react. This wasn't a full trial. Not yet. It was a preliminary hearing on multiple petitions, the injunction to freeze Victor's legal and financial access, the official challenge to the forged medical consent, and the motion to trigger formal investigation into the hospital's internal financial practices. But everyone in the room knew this was bigger than paperwork. This was a public scalpel to the gut. The judge opened with the consent fraud claim. Janice stood. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. She presented 3 pieces of evidence. First, the audit logs. Precise timestamps showing when my chart was accessed. Who logged in. What was uploaded. Second, the forensic comparison of my legitimate signature against the forged one. Third, the payment records from the hospital's internal incentive program, the one that awarded a $2,000 bonus for my overnight surgery, marked with Bennett's name, referred by Victor. Janice didn't overstate. She didn't need to. She let the paper do the talking. The judge read in silence. flipped pages, highlighted a few lines, then asked for the defense. Renner stood. He didn't argue the facts, he argued the interpretation. He said Victor acted under stress, that the situation had escalated due to hospital confusion, that my brother had relied on hospital personnel who presented the consent process as routine, that Victor had been misled. It was a weak narrative. But it didn't need to convince everyone, just enough to stall. Until Janice presented the fourth item, the digital mortgage application, the one Victor submitted at 3:11 a.m. while I was unconscious post-surgery, signed under my name, linked to an IP address traced to Victor's laptop. Renner went quiet. The judge leaned forward. "This isn't about confusion," Janice said. "This is about a coordinated attempt to strip a competent individual of her rights, her property, and her legal agency. The defendant not only bypassed proper channels, he exploited internal hospital structures for personal financial gain." Renner tried to interrupt. The judge raised a hand. "Do you deny that the defendant was listed as a paid contractor in connection to 3 Medicare cases under active investigation?" Renner paused. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded once. By noon, the decision came down. The emergency injunction was made permanent. Victor was barred from acting in any legal or financial capacity related to me or my estate. All previous filings, powers of attorney, and guardianship petitions were vacated. The court ordered the DA to open formal investigation into fraud and elder abuse. Victor's face fell. His shoulders collapsed into the chair. But it wasn't over. The judge turned to Janice and said, "If your client is willing, I will permit a statement for the record before we recess." Janice looked at me. I stood, my cane steady, my voice stronger than I expected. For 41 years, I lived in a home I bought with my husband. I buried him there. I raised his nephews there. I hosted every Thanksgiving while everyone else chased promotions and cruise tickets. And when my health slipped, I didn't ask for help. I planned. I made legal arrangements. I took care of things myself. I glanced at Victor, who was staring at the floor. But some people don't see preparation. They see opportunity. They see age and assume silence. They see recovery and assume weakness. I paused. They forget that scars mean survival. The courtroom didn't applaud. It stayed quiet, which made the silence feel louder than any clapping ever could. As I stepped down, the judge dismissed the session, but not before confirming the case would move forward to criminal review. Janice exhaled beside me. Outside, cameras were waiting. I didn't speak. Not yet. There would be a time for microphones. But first, I needed to finish what I started. The system that enabled Victor had just been cracked open. Now it was time to pull everything else out into the light. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, Victor's name was stripped from every real estate document he had touched. The emergency motion Janice filed triggered an immediate reversal on the second mortgage attempt. The digital lien vanished off county records within 36 hours. The private lender who processed it received a subpoena from the State Attorney General's office before they could issue a statement. It didn't matter what they claimed. The IP address linked it directly to Victor's laptop. His bank accounts froze next. Not just the ones under his name, but 2 others tied to shell companies he thought were buried. Janice's forensic accountant uncovered them in a single afternoon. One had been funneling consulting payments from Bennett's office at the hospital. The other had moved 3 separate wire transfers in and out of accounts labeled Care Transition Assistance. That phrase came up again in the DOJ report. Care transition had been their term, their branding, a polite cover for elder exploitation. Bennett resigned the next morning. The hospital issued a revised statement. It was longer this time, less polished, less defensive, the kind of statement written under pressure, not conviction. They promised a full internal review. They promised transparency. They promised new oversight structures. But promises don't erase payouts. That afternoon, Janice and I received a direct call from the OIG. They wanted a full interview. We sat in a private conference room at a neutral location. No courtroom, no press. Just a quiet space with a digital recorder and two investigators who already knew most of the story. But they wanted details, names, timelines, emails, transaction patterns, and I gave it to them. For 4 hours, I walked them through every single move Victor made. The first lien, the forged consent, the hospital's policy, the timeline of his visits, the billing data, the bonuses. They asked if I wanted to remain anonymous in the public filings. I said no. They nodded. The moment the interview ended, Janice pulled me aside. Now we hit the third rail, she said. The one Victor had been afraid of the whole time. His clients. See, Victor hadn't just targeted me. He had bragged about me, used my name as proof that his methods worked, that he could help families transition difficult estates without triggering legal scrutiny. He called it quiet shift consulting. What he didn't count on was one of his former clients calling Janice, a woman named Leah. Her aunt died 5 months ago. Surgery, followed by a stroke. Same hospital, same department. She signed away the house 2 days before going under. Documents processed by Victor. Leah came forward with everything. Emails, voicemails. One conversation where Victor laughed and said, "She'll never know. Most of them don't." We filed her affidavit into the case the next day. That's when Victor stopped showing up. No court, no office, no phone. But he wasn't gone. Janice located a townhouse he had rented under a different name in the next county. Quiet street, no driveway, blinds always drawn. She called the sheriff. Warrant arrived 2 days later. When they entered, Victor was inside. Alone. No resistance, no protest. They walked him out in cuffs. The photo hit the news within an hour. His hair was unkempt, his face pale. The man who once signed my life away without blinking now looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. He probably hadn't. The charges were read aloud that evening. 5 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of forgery, 2 counts of elder exploitation, 1 count of obstruction. More were coming. Bennett was named in a separate investigation. And as the hospital scrambled to distance itself, more former patients began to speak. More names, more stories, a class action began forming. But none of that moved me. What did, though, was the letter I received 3 days after Victor's arrest. Typed, no signature. But the handwriting on the envelope was his. Inside, a single line. "You were never supposed to fight back." He was right. I wasn't. But I did. And now, everything he built on my silence was burning behind him. Exactly as it should. The next morning, the phone rang twice before I picked up. It was Sandra. Her voice was sharp, too calm to be genuine. She said she was coming by with Brendan and a notary. They had something to discuss. I already knew what it was. I told her I was available, then hung up and poured myself a coffee like it was any other morning. But it wasn't. They arrived promptly at 10, Brendan in a navy blue blazer, hair too neatly combed, looking like a real estate agent trying too hard. Sandra wore cream silk and sunglasses, as if she were shielding herself from judgment. The notary, a quiet man in his 60s, trailed behind them, holding a briefcase. I invited them in without a word. We all sat in the dining room. I didn't offer coffee. Brendan cleared his throat and started. He spoke as if reciting from a script. He thanked me for being open to transition and said it was time to finalize the formalization of asset consolidation. His words were dense, rehearsed, filled with legal dressing that only barely masked the greed beneath. Then Sandra took over. She laid out a folder and opened it to reveal a packet of papers. She gestured for the notary to prepare his seal. She spoke of responsibilities, estate management, legacy stewardship. None of it meant anything. It was all about control, about erasing me cleanly and quietly from my own life. She turned the page and pointed to a line where my signature was expected. The transfer of ownership, the formal surrender of everything. The ranch, the investment accounts, the mineral royalties, the family trust. I looked at the line, then looked up. My hand didn't move toward the pen. Instead, I reached into the side drawer of the buffet cabinet behind me. I pulled out my own folder, thicker, heavier, and a lot more dangerous. I placed it gently on the table and opened it slowly, page by page. Brendan's face tensed the moment he saw the header on the first document. Sandra's jaw clenched. They both leaned in, scanning quickly. What they saw wasn't a transfer. It was a finalized deed, filed and registered 3 weeks earlier. It legally reassigned the ranch and all adjacent lands into the Marston Foundation for Independent Women, a non-profit. The board had already been appointed. The assets were no longer mine to sign away. They now belonged to the public mission of helping older women become financially self-reliant. Brendan's voice faltered first. He stammered, asking what this was. But I didn't let him finish. I handed him the next document. It was the dissolution certificate of the original family trust, signed, notarized, and processed. All accounts had been redistributed. Some were locked into long-term charitable endowments. Others secured in philanthropic grant structures. All legal. All irreversible. The notary looked confused. He wasn't expecting this. He fumbled to close his briefcase, as if instinct told him the room was shifting in temperature. Sandra tried to salvage the moment. She said this must be some kind of mistake. She demanded an explanation, so I gave her one. I told them about the lawyer I had met quietly at the town hall 2 months ago. I told them about the tax consultant from Chicago, who helped structure the entire transition. About the 2 retired judges who sat on the foundation board. About the state compliance officer who had already signed off the asset movement to prevent exactly the kind of coercion they were now attempting. I said I had watched my husband build this land with his bare hands, that he believed in the value of work, that he had left it to me not just to preserve, but to protect. Then I slid the final envelope across the table. Inside were the security camera photos of Brendan sneaking into my home while I was at the hospital, the digital logs of Sandra's unauthorized access to my bank statements, and a copy of the power of attorney request they had tried to file behind my back before I returned from the clinic. Brendan went pale. Sandra reached for the envelope like she could hide it, but I didn't let go until I saw her knuckles whiten. This wasn't just refusal. It was exposure. I looked at the notary and told him the meeting was over. He stood and left immediately. Brendan didn't follow. He sat frozen. Sandra muttered something about lawyers, about defamation, about consequences. But I reminded her there already had been consequences, and this was the part where they learned to live with them. I stood, calmly walked to the front door, and opened it wide. They had no choice but to leave. No dramatic yelling, no slamming chairs. Just silence. Cold, stunned silence. By the time their car pulled out of the gravel drive, I had already called my foundation coordinator. I asked her to schedule the first training session at the community hall next week. It would be about how to reclaim financial dignity after retirement. There was already a waiting list. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself another cup of coffee. For the first time in months, it tasted like freedom. The courthouse steps had never felt so quiet. No screaming, no accusations, no arguments, just the wind brushing past me like a whispered reminder that I had done what I came to do. For decades, my life had been run by noise. Noise from Brendan, from Kayla, from lawyers, from neighbours with too many opinions and not enough facts. But today, silence felt like the loudest victory. The judge's ruling stood firm. The foundation transfer was airtight. The financial split was complete. Every asset once entangled in that family's expectations was now completely beyond their reach, and I had nothing left to explain. I returned to my new apartment near the bay, the one with the view Brendan said was too expensive for someone like me. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. No hand-me-downs, no shared title, no eyes watching my every move, just the ocean, and the slow, rhythmic crash of waves that seemed to echo my own heartbeat. I brewed tea in silence. No calls, no knocks on the door, no entitled demands for clarification. Just a brief message on my phone from the foundation board confirming the scholarship fund was now operational, and the first 20 applicants were already under review. Single mothers over 40, women who had been cast aside but weren't ready to give up on themselves, women who just needed someone to bet on them once. I leaned back in my chair and let the thought settle in. The money that Brendan once called dead weight was now building futures, real futures, not vacation homes or designer kitchens, futures with grit and courage and resilience, things no spreadsheet could ever quantify. Brendan's last email had come in 3 hours after the ruling. No apology, no humility, just one line. "You will regret this." I didn't respond. Regret was a luxury I had long since given up. Regret belonged to the ones who burned bridges without realizing they were still standing on them. I had crossed mine, brick by brick, until I stood on my own shore. Later that evening, I went down to the marina. The air was thick with salt and diesel and the laughter of strangers who didn't know my story, and for once, that felt like freedom. A boy walked by holding his grandmother's hand. She smiled at me, a small nod that passed between us like an unspoken alliance. I nodded back. No words needed. The boat I had purchased with my own savings bobbed in its slip. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't massive, but it had sails and enough soul to carry me wherever I wanted to go. I named it the Quiet One, a tribute to the part of me that had waited so long to be heard, and now didn't need to shout to be powerful. The marina manager came by to drop off the keys. His eyes widened when he saw my name on the title. He chuckled and said, "Well, looks like someone finally took the wheel." I smiled, more to myself than to him. Taking the wheel didn't mean storming through life. Sometimes it just meant no longer being dragged behind someone else's. A few days later, the foundation released its public statement. The press picked it up. Headlines danced across local news. Woman donates entire fortune to support women over 40. Anonymous widow builds pathways out of poverty. I never asked them to use my name. But someone leaked it. I didn't mind. Not anymore. Kayla posted something bitter on social media, accusing me of attention-seeking. Brendan tried to deny everything, but the court record didn't lie. And neither did the silence of those who once cheered them on. One by one, the likes on their posts faded. One by one, the calls stopped. One by one, their world shrank to the size of their own entitlement. Meanwhile, mine expanded. I went to a small event hosted by the first cohort of scholarship recipients. They didn't know me, not by face, just by what the fund stood for. I listened to their stories. Some had left abusive marriages. Others were rebuilding after bankruptcy or cancer. All of them had fight in their eyes. None of them asked why someone had chosen to help them. They just looked forward. At the end of the event, a woman named Camille pulled me aside. Mid-50s, former nurse, starting a new career in community organizing. She didn't know who I was. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Whoever started this, I hope she knows she saved lives." I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded and whispered, "I think she knows." That night, back at my apartment, I finally pulled the last photo of Brendan and me from the drawer. It was from years ago. He was 5, maybe 6, covered in chocolate from a birthday cake I had stayed up all night baking. I didn't burn it. I didn't rip it. I just slipped it into a folder marked "Before." Because healing doesn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it just means choosing where to place the memory. Outside, the tide was coming in. I opened the window, let the breeze rush through. And for the first time in years, I slept without locking the bedroom door. Because some stories don't end with revenge. Some end with peace. And some, like mine, begin again right when everyone else thinks they've ended. If you've ever felt like your story was ending because someone else decided it should, let this be your reminder that you hold the pen. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as taking the wheel, setting your course, and not looking back.